Hey there, internet friends. Trevor Starkey here. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. As I said, I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? I didn't. It's not like it's a slightly cracked open cold one, but I got a Mexican Coke here to go along
Good
with
deal.
your McDonald's. How you doing, Cam?
Good. I had a sausage egg McMuffin for breakfast this morning, and by this morning I mean like 10:30. And I also got two Dr. Peppers
I
to
mean
go
that.
along with it.
I mean
So,
that would be this morning.
yep. Uh, I think most like it was before 10:30, so I didn't wasn't able to also grab a fish fillet. But as a friend of the show, Jarrett Green knows, I'm a bit of an oddball in that like I like to have a fish sandwich in the morning.
Yeah.
Um, when I told him that like I was getting a fish fillet for breakfast, he asked me if I was a Jamaican grandfather, because according to him, that's a go-to staple: a cup of coffee and a fish fillet. And I gotta say, I respect it. It's a power move. It's good stuff. If I like coffee more than I do, then I probably would be going for a cup of coffee in the morning with a fish fillet sandwich. I gotta admit, like it's good stuff.
All right. I swung by Raisin Cane's, so I got some of that for
Mm.
lunch this afternoon. Enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Nice little and they finally started doing mobile orders, so now I can just kind
Oh
of
gosh.
I can put the order in, get in my car, drive there, walk in, pick it up, and leave. Don't have to
Oh, they
wait.
let you go inside now
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. They're
that's
doing
nice.
at least at the one by ASU. Yeah. It's I don't no. Yeah, I think they're doing like walk-in orders too. But it's not like dine-in. You can't stay and eat. It's
Yeah,
like you got to get it to go.
yeah.
But it beats waiting in the the drive-through line, especially because that location doesn't really have a lot of like extra leeway.
Oh, it does
So
not.
so there have been a couple times I've been like, I'm feeling Raising Canes. I'm gonna drive and I'll drive by it, and like you can't get into the parking lot because it's so backed up, and I'm like, all right, in and out it is. So I just kind of
There you go.
drive past, turn, and then in and out is on the way home basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, now
I will say, my solution to that is I stop by a Bahama Bucks beforehand, get myself a Bahama Rama Mama strawberry cheese. I should preface this. Bahama Bucks is a shaved ice place, and a Bahama Rama Mama there means they put ice cream at the bottom. So, because otherwise it sounds like I'm saying I get like a liquor alcohol drink on my way through a drive like to go sit in a drive-through for Raising Canes. I do not.
that's yeah, I guess
I'm like I need to clarify that real quick because otherwise people are gonna be like, did Cameron just say that he gets like a super boozy drink to just like sit in the line at Raising Canes? Don't drink and drive, people. It's irresponsible
you gotta do. Yeah, no, absolutely not.
and illegal.
Um, yeah,
But yeah, no. So I usually just like get myself that shaved ice with the ice cream at the bottom, strawberry cheesecake flavored, and I just eat that. And I'm like, by the time I'm home, I've like finished the shaved ice. I'm ready to eat the Raisin Canes. It's a good time.
there you go. Yeah, I very much appreciate that I can pop in there, park, walk in, grab my food, and then just walk right out and be headed home. It is a game changer in my Raisin Canes experience right now. I am frustrated slash annoyed in that one of my family members got me like a Raisin Canes gift card for Christmas, and that along with like the other gift cards I got, I took them and threw them in my car, and now I can't find that or the Chipotle ones. And I'm like, what happened? Like, I've tried to
Mm,
retrace the steps. Like, the only thing I can think is that like it shifted from like and slid around and is like now sitting underneath one of the chairs or something. And I've checked, haven't been able to find it. So I'm hoping those two will resurface. Like all the other ones I can find and track down, but those two in particular, I'm like, I don't know what happened to these gift cards. Anyway, enough about that. You are here for That Nerdy Site Show. A little bit of housekeeping before we hop into kind of our core topics of the show this week. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful monthly Patreon producers, Pam and Bev Larson, Sherry Starkey, Teresa Wilkinson, and myself, Trevor Starkey, and also our newest That Nerdy Site patron, Cameron Abbott. Thank you for supporting us, Cameron,
What?
at the
What?
dollar and above level,
Yeah.
because you forgot that you could just hop into the YouTube from the back end if you wanted to watch the Patreon early access exclusive episode that's up right now of Logan and I talking about our 2020. Yeah, it was I just we talked about it a little bit yesterday. It was fun to just see your name pop up there in my email and be like,
Yep.
okay, cool. Yeah,
Would have been
let's
crazier if I hadn't changed my name back. I was preparing KGN Naughty Gamers
for a patron
for
launch.
for a Patreon launch. Like we prepared that year too. Never launched in the 4.5 years that we were running it.
Yeah.
But like I was like, I'm just sitting on it waiting. And my favorite thing in the world was making Blessing Adeoye Jr. Now it's kind of funny. Back when they were doing OK Beast, have to thank my podcast for supporting his
Mm-hmm.
by mouth. And then they changed it to my name.
Mm.
I was like, well,
All right.
that's fun.
Yeah.
And then we shuttered Naughty Gamers, and I patched that thing up
Yeah.
and made it back into my own. But yeah, like I'm like, that's fun.
The fun fact, that nerdy site Patreon supported Kinda Funny last year, or yeah, in 2020 for their Kinda Funny Day. Just so, because one of the benefits was like anybody who supports on Kinda Funny Day 2020 will get their name like written on the wall in the new studio. So I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and put that nerdy site up on the wall in the new Kinda Funny studio. So we threw $1 to the cause for that for Kinda Funny last year, and we are recording this the day before Kinda Funny Live, Kinda Funny Day 2021, which will be today if you're listening to this, the day this episode goes live. So I'm excited to see what all they have in store for this year, as I am every year. So we will.
It's just a good time.
Yeah, good time.
It's a good time. It's a good stream.
Yep.
Um, you know, last year we were able to push enough that our friend got the Xbox Xcast.
Yep.
Snowbike Mike hosted that.
Yep.
Hopefully they bring something back with that because I mean, let's just face it, we all need more Snowbike Mike in our lives.
Yeah, I got to imagine something's going to happen with it. The only hang up I would say, obviously they lost Alana, midway through their pilot run or whatever, because she got that great job at Sony Santa Monica. I got to imagine Gary isn't like long for another weekly podcast in the rotation. So my guess is that they are going to bring it back, but it's going to be Snowbike Mike and another like permanent host, and then Gary will come on as for the occasional third chair or something like that. But I imagine that is what it'll be. It'll be like Snowbike Mike
I don't
and
know, like
somebody else.
I don't know because by the time they were wrapping up their run, Gary and Mike have developed such a really great like back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And just a really great, when Alana was there too, it was like really wonderful to see them just bounce off of each other. But really, Mike and Gary were able to hone in on something really good towards the end of it. So I don't know if it's a matter, like it might be, because if there's one thing that I can tell you, it's that working with Snowbike Mike does not drain you; it energizes you.
Yeah, no,
It's a shot of adrenaline in your veins right away. But like I don't know what his like. But you're right. It could be his availability. I
yeah,
mean, he did say he was writing another book, so
I was gonna say it's just that Gary is a busy guy, and
yeah.
like obviously talking, animal talking and talk guys took a lot of time, out of his 2020 as well. So I imagine he's gonna have to try and start refocusing and getting back to kind of his film writing and then just book writing and all that stuff. Maybe he's working on one of the new Star Wars shows, since there are like a billion of them. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my biggest guess on like something is going to come back with the Xcast, but it's going to look different, I guess. But we'll still like I think they'll maybe bring Paris Lily on as like a co-host for Mike in the kind of like Imran is there as kind of a supporting cast of Kind of Funny. So that's my
True.
I guess my prediction. We'll see. By the time this goes live, maybe we already know what's going on, or by the time you're
Yeah.
listening to this. But enough about Kind of Funny Day. Let us talk about what we've been playing. It's been a little while since we've had kind of one of these regular episodes since we did. Let's see, we did Wonder Woman last week, was kind of our spoiler cast. And then
Yeah.
before that, I think we did an episode. It's. I feel like it's been a while since we did just kind of a like, hey, let's catch up and talk about games. So I have a few to talk about, but before we get into any of mine, we'll throw it to you, Cam, for kind of maybe the central one of the show because as we touched on in a meeting yesterday to discuss our game of the year plans, you mentioned that this game kind of came in and shook up your list. You are quite shooketh and very taken with this game, and that is 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. So tell us about it, Cam. Tell me about 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. Like I've heard great things about it from the people who've played it. It just doesn't look like anything that I'm gonna ever latch on to myself.
Vanillaware is such a weird company because they keep on doing things that are really wild, and they usually make like a game per generation, right? Um, in the PS2 era, they came out with Odin Sphere. Um, in the PS3 era, it was Dragon's Crown, and this generation, at the very tail end of it, um, they're bringing in 13 Sentinels, and they are a very interesting company when you look at like what they've put out because all three of these games, I think Odin Sphere and Dragon's Crown have something in common because they both have to do with fantasy, although Dragon's Crown is more traditional elves, dwarves, what you expect out of like a Tolkien-esque fantasy, while Odin Sphere was dedicated towards um, like a unique take on Norse mythology and legend and whatnot. With and all of their games are really beautifully, um, beautifully voice acted. Like they always have a really great voice acting talent brought in that is a mix of longtime veterans and newer voices. And 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is no different. I think what's super interesting is also each of those games that I mentioned, they all have different like they all have different combat aspects, but they all have something in common in which it's always an ensemble cast. There's always a group of people that you're focusing on. Admittedly, I've never played Dragon's Crown, so I don't know how deep that story goes. But in Odin Sphere, you're like the meta story is that you're a little girl reading through these big storybooks of like Norse mythology told as a fairy tale. And in 13 Sentinels, you play it very differently. 13 Sentinels, for anybody who hasn't read the back of the box version of what's going on, is it's 1985 in Tokyo, and the world is being invaded by these alien invaders descending from the sky called Deimos, and Deimos are kaiju. They're these metallic creatures that are very just like mysteriously appearing for some reason, and they all have to do and tie in with a deep well, like a deep well of sci-fi combination of tropes and narrative storytelling aspects and techniques that I think it's possibly one of the best sci-fi stories told in the last 20, 30 years. Um, it does it does everything right, even if it's something that I'm not a big fan of. It nails. Um, there's a couple of things, and like the problem of sci-fi is that romance in sci-fi is always kind of weird and like rough, and there are certain characters that the key aspect of their story is a romance central to it, and it's done very like it basically is a critique and homage to B tier sci-fi movies from the 80s. And so like the this I'm sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place here. Let me go ahead and try to refocus.
It's, I
There's
mean,
so much
like,
this game does.
I mean, it sounds like there's a lot to it, and we don't need to dive into like a huge, like, you don't need to tell me the whole
Yeah.
plot of the game. I've looked it up a little bit here on the Wikipedia, and it is like 13 Sentinels. It is an Octopath Traveler esque kind of thing where it's telling the story over these 13 different characters.
Yeah.
Um, you're jumping
So
between times. It looks like.
yeah. So each of the 13 characters come from like there's a core group of them. The central story all takes place in 1985, and the way the game is built out is it has three different sections. Section one is called Remembrance. It's the story aspect that leads up to the day of confrontation with the Deimos in 1985. You have the combat section, which is the actual combat missions that you run in 1985 to try to defeat the Deimos. And then you have like an encyclopedia section that has one part is you unlock these meta points to unlock different sections of characters in this like like this not Wikipedia but like a like in the back of a book when it would have like a breakdown of characters and terms and
The
stuff.
index, yeah, it's like I
Index,
saw
thank you.
something.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like a word cloud kind of thing, and you learn keywords that'll kind of unlock scenes.
Oh, that's part of the story section. This
Oh,
is a
okay.
separate section
Oh, okay.
that is just an index of like terms and stuff. So if you're like, wait up, hold up, what was that again? And you can go to it, and even as you unlock further more information, another section can be added to more of these things. So some of them are very basic, like setting location, and then others are each character. And as you learn more about each character through the different playthroughs that you do, more information is unlocked. But the second part of that is a because you're bouncing around times a lot in different character stories, and depending on like how you like what event you're unlocking when, there is a actual standard timeline that when by the time you finish the game it's all filled out. And so after you finish the game you can go back and be like, oh, that happened then or this happened then. It's clear when you're playing,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're playing a story that takes
That's fragmented like that.
fragmented like that, but also it takes like 30 plus hours to get through,
Mm-hmm.
uh like you can forget some stuff that happened and then you're reminded of it later. And the great thing is that when you go to this long list of events, you can actually select it, and it lets you go through it again.
Okay.
So after you beat the game, you can go through the game in chronological order from beginning to end if you want, and like play it out that way. And that's a fun thing to do. I did that just the other day as like a fun thing. Be like, I want like let's see the story from beginning to end properly, and I did that, and it was great. The story checks out. Like it is solid. It goes places that are nuts, but it sticks the landing in so many ways that I have been like the biggest thing that I found, the biggest frustration I've been finding from games is that they take very big audacious leaps and then they don't land them.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit
Um,
off air because we'd already kind of talked about Cyberpunk in depth. But
yeah,
you mentioned that you've since beaten Cyberpunk 2077, and were very disappointed with like the possible endings you could have had in that game.
yeah, it's it's not very like there's for a game that gives you so much liberty and choice throughout the playthrough, the actual big important story beats are so confined to unsatisfactory options, especially the ending. You don't have a lot of variance in what is essentially an A, B, or C decision unless you want to do this D one that's hidden behind like all these choices that you had to have made over the 80 hours that you've been playing the game
Yeah, that was when you
in a
mentioned like,
convoluted way.
oh, you can forget things. I was like, yeah, like in Cyberpunk, when I was getting near the end game, I'd be referencing characters. I was like, oh, that's right, I did save that person 20 hours ago. I've completely forgotten about that character or something like that.
Yeah. So a game like Cyberpunk doesn't land. The Last of Us Part 2 I didn't feel landed well. Um, like there's the games that are just like they're making these big narrative leaps and these big narrative challenges and taking these like very big risks, and they're not playing out and they're not working on every level. And it's something that I was really surprised that Aegis Rim does. By the end of the game, by the time you roll end credits, it is a completely 100% satisfactory story. Every loose end gets tied up. There is like it works within its own logic. It never breaks its own logic. Um, and it tells like there are some seriously really good sci-fi storytelling going on in that game that is a beautiful honor and homage to like great sci-fi things, down to the point where when one of the 13 Sentinels gets out of their Aegis, or not their Aegis, their Sentinel, um, it has a full-on Terminator effect of like the like instead of lightning, it's more like a tealish aura. But when people get out of their cockpit, they're all in the Terminator stance, and it's awesome because it's like that's just a little like these little fine details about something like Terminator. They have
And they're fully naked too, right?
they're only naked when they're in the Aegis and
Yeah.
it
Okay.
or in the Sentinel. That is never really brought up
Okay.
because
It like
that's never focused on.
I remember that being something that Britt
Yeah, that was
Baumgartner,
a thing.
in particular, on What's Good, kind of mentioned when she was playing it, and I was like, I mean, okay, sure.
Like they're naked, but like they never bring it up, and like the kids are always like covered.
Yeah, like
Like you can
you're
tell
not
they're
seeing
naked,
anything,
but
but yeah.
like yeah, no. And then it never puts the kids in any of like super compromising positions.
I just bring it up because that's what I think of when I think of the Terminator pose, is like down on the
Oh, but they're
ground.
clothed. Yeah, they're clothed in those scenes.
Okay.
They're clothed. They're in like their school uniforms and stuff. I should have prefaced that. You're right.
Okay.
Especially because they're naked in the cockpit,
Yeah.
and when they get out of the cockpit, they're fully clothed, and that actually is like it ties into something at the end. Um, it like and but like it's like the characters aren't like the way that it's shot, the way that it's done. They're not like it's not
It's not done for titillation or
it's not
anything.
ex- it's not exploitive.
Yeah.
It's not exploitive. It's just like it makes sense when you get to the end. It's like oh that makes sense. But they never bring up that they're naked.
Hmm.
That never comes up. I think maybe one person says, "Why am I naked in here?" And everybody just like ignores it and moves on. Uh, it's like it's and for the most part in the actual story remembrance where you're spending the majority of time with like the actual characters, that takes place outside of the cockpit 99% of the time.
Hmm.
So and it's fun. It is fun because you deal with so each time period is 40 years apart. You have 1945, 1985. Um, what is 40 years past 1985?
2025.
2025 is another one. And then after 2025, it's 2065. So these are the four main time periods that you're dealing with. And like those are like the set locations for it. The characters from 1945, there's two of them. They are like young 16, 17-year old like recent recruits to the Imperial Army of Japan. And they are preparing for the American invasion of mainland Japan from Okinawa. And so it is a very like there is a very like when they both of those characters go to 1985 and they have both have very different experiences in 1985, where one of them who is a lot more of the uh, like national pride. I don't want to get to the point where I would call him a nationalist, but he's a product of his time. Like a lot of strong national pride. But even he has like an enormous weakness to yakisoba pan, which is like a yakisoba sandwich in a sweetbread that he is obsessed with, and he thinks it's the greatest invention of all time. So it's like there's stuff like that. Each of the characters is unique and different, and each of them are doing their own sci-fi storytelling. Uh, it's interesting too because in the central stories where romance is the main theme, it features characters who, in their own section of the game, are not dealing with romance. Um, like one of the main characters is a key point for a lot of characters in that he's a central character to the overall plot. They all kind of are, but he's definitely at its most center because of his situation. But what ends up happening is like a girl's story is being in love with him and having to do like what she does in regards to their relationship and the complications and complexities of their relationship at this point that the game is taking place in. His story doesn't have anything to do with that. Very very briefly has her around for it. But his story is about a completely different kind of sci-fi subject. Uh, one girl is like it does such an amazing job of telling like very classic sci-fi storytelling that even the romantic stuff is very atypical, but it fits with what it's telling. And even though it might be a bit um, basic, for lack of a better term, it's basic because that's the kind of story it wants to tell, and it does it well.
Okay,
So I love it.
so let's step away from the story a little bit. What's the gameplay of it? The it's because I mean, like you've focused so heavily on the story. But I don't know what kind of game it is.
Cool. So it is. So Remembrance is a side-scrolling kind of uh, I would say almost point and click adventure like. You do talk to people, find out new information. It pulls up into a word cloud that you can access to try to like, and that can be used to examine it to reveal more information about it, or use it as a keyword to ask somebody about it, starting a new conversation point.
Okay.
So very point and click adventure type. That's the Remembrance story part of it. And the Vanillaware, like the beautiful Vanillaware artwork is going on while this is happening. The biggest change that I think they've made is for the combat portion of the game. It is designed to look like a 1980s strategy game in that it is a very graphics light um, 3D grid model with icons and like representing each unit, rather each Sentinel, rather than like a full-on 3D model of the Sentinel. And I'm really curious if this was a design choice that they wanted to go with straight away, or if it was a matter of they knew what their budget was, and this is the best way to like produce a worthwhile combat and strategy game within it to not offset cost for like 3D modeling or anything like that, or even 2D modeling for it. So they use these icons instead. And because of the different variances of Deimos over the course of the game, um, you have close up melee Deimos, you have aerial Deimos, you have like straight up like airship Deimos that are coming in, and each of these Deimos type classes have to be dealt with in a different kind of approach. And each Sentinel has a different set of abilities based upon what generation they are. So there's 4 generations of Sentinels. Your first generation Sentinel is melee focused. They have very few long range approaches, and the long range approaches they mostly have are an ability to drop an EMP on a section of enemies, so they can drop aerial enemies to the ground and then attack them over the course of a turn. But it's not as feasible as say a longer range unit just shooting them out of the sky. But melee units are absolute powerhouses with multiple abilities to and multiple weapons to just clear out loads of ground enemies at once. Just really awesome. And Generation 2 is a hybrid, so they do long range and close range. Really more medium range than long range, but they are very useful in because they have support abilities to drop down like shield emitters or turrets, or like they call them sentry guns. And Gen 3 is long range, and they have awesome abilities long range, including one called Missile Rain, where they literally rain a cloud of missiles over the course of like 8 seconds and it just like it can take out tons of small enemies. But what that's really useful for is when you're facing a lot of enemies that shoot missiles. Missiles are actually separate projectiles that you can shoot out of the sky, and if you don't shoot them down, there's a chance they'll hit your central point that you're trying to protect. They're super easy to shoot down though with any kind of like gun, but if you are just like only have melee around there, it's super tough to deal with that.
Hmm.
Some melee units have anti-air flares, so they can kind of put up like a small, really weak anti-air barrier to try to like blow those up. Um, Gen 4, the Gen 4 models are aerial units. So because it's based off of a city grid structure, Gen 1 through 3 has to move around the city based off of roads.
Yeah.
And so do the ground Deimos. But aerial Deimos and area and Gen 4 units are able to fly through the sky, and so they can avoid all of that, and they move incredibly fast. They are some of the lighter, weaker units, but they also have each pilot for each Sentinel has special abilities, and they give them kind of like a counter edge to the disadvantage they otherwise would have. And every 5 levels, you unlock a new one. Um, the variety of like abilities and everything. So there's a core essential part of abilities that each unit has, but then each unit also has exclusive things that only they can do. So one of the Gen 2 units can drop 2 sentry turrets rather than just one. And they drop two, and all of a sudden you have double the firepower. Um,
So
it's yeah,
on
it's just like it's awesome.
tying the combat side of things to the story, the remembrance story side of things, is it certain characters are only in certain units, or is it kind of like you can there it's
No,
interchangeable, like it's you have these units and then, whatever character you have basically can go into any of them.
so Remembrance is a prologue to the events that happen in the battle section, and it's basically explaining how each of the Sentinels gets from where they start in the story to where they are ready for the final battle. So you're helping each of the students, or each they're all students, but you're helping each of the Sentinels get to the point where they're ready for the final battle.
Okay.
And that's kind of like given as the first introduction, because the first part of Remembrance is an introduction to you see some of the students activating their Sentinels to fight the kaiju in 1985. And it's kind of like okay, well, how did they all get here? Like, who are these Sentinels? How do they all get there? Because if you only play the battle section, there's a lot of like key relationships that otherwise wouldn't understand. But it does get to a point where you can't continue into the battle section until you complete more progress in the Remembrance section,
Okay.
and vice versa. You can't get too far in Remembrance until you've passed certain waves. So they do tie into each other
Hmm.
in a really good way.
So you're kind of
Uh,
switching back and forth between the two.
yeah.
Okay.
I will also say that there is and by doing battles and the Remembrance stuff, you unlock what's called meta chips, which are used to give upgrades to unlock new abilities or increase the power of some abilities, as well as increase the overall like output of your unit. Each Sentinel has like different sections of what you can then upgrade. So if you want to upgrade the armor, you want to upgrade the generator to produce more MP, for lack of a better term. Um, because there are base abilities that don't cost anything, but then there is a rechargeable bar that a rechargeable resource rather that each Sentinel generates that has like abilities have certain costs to them.
Yeah.
Better abilities do have like higher costs. Like missile rain, you can do a couple of times, but then you're out of that completely. And there's an ability you have called recharge, which is you defend, like you basically go into a defense mode and you recharge while you're doing that. So you
Hmm.
take less damage while also regaining ability points. So they don't like they put those two together, which I thought was like a really good crucial thing, because I don't want my guys like I have my guy positioned in a place that otherwise would make him really vulnerable, but I put him into like that defense mode to recharge. He's fine afterwards, and then I go ahead and I use my like really good ability. There's one called Demolisher Blade that like just cleaves through enemies and just is awesome. And all three of the melee units have one. Um,
And are you typically doing like one-on-one battles, or is it like you'll have a few Sentinels in a battle versus a few Kaiju, or one versus
So
many?
you so there are 13 Sentinels overall. You are able to build a party of 6 of them.
Okay.
The other 7 stay static around the like the point of that you're trying to protect on the defense grid. And that's called an Aegis. The Aegis terminals are located all around the city, and you're trying to protect each of them from a Deimos invasion. Um, and so 7 Sentinels remain around the Aegis terminal, uh, and they uh, each of the Sentinels has a called a defense ability that is used, so they do support for others. So some of them, like one of the units will heal while they're like will heal other units outside. So they'll shoot like oh my guy's pretty low on health. Oh, somebody shot a support beam to give him a shield and a health boost. And there's stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, and then there's like the melee units when they are on defense, they send out regular EMP waves to bring down enemies, and slow them down.
Okay, so they
It's
basically act as like passive buffs
mhm.
throughout the combat while you're controlling your 6 active Sentinels. Okay. Cool.
And sometimes you want to take that into consideration. The later levels, I was playing it just through normal mode. The later levels, like so, you're trying to survive these waves of enemies and clear them out, or last 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes pause every time the timer pauses. Every time when you go into make a decision, so you like a match might last like 5-10 minutes, but only 40 seconds has passed in the actual timer in the actual battle.
Yeah.
And so you're on these 2 minute like crunch times, and each of these Aegises do have the like the quote unquote it puts a strain on your mind, so you can't be in it for too long. And so that has something to do with the 2 minute timer for the battle. But it also has some narrative stuff for like certain character stories about what happens when they stay in for too long,
Okay.
or what happens when something happens to their sentinel that damages the neuromachines in their or the nanomachines in their brain. Like something happens to that, and that's central to some of the characters' story and plot line, and it's really cool. Like I said, it knows the rules of its universe, and it plays by them super well down to the point of combat, and it's so good. Like I cannot believe that more people haven't played this game
I mean,
because
it
yeah,
sounds like a lot to get into, so I absolutely can believe that a lot of people haven't played this game. um, yeah, it
I
sounds like
understand it came
a
out.
lot is going
Yeah,
on, and it's throwing a lot of newness at you, kind of all at once. It sounds like.
not. I would say it comes out at a very good rate. Like it trickles out really well. Because it's not like an overwhelming like, oh, you open up the game and then you're flooded with all this information. It walks you through things very well. To the point where like even if it's walking you through something, uh, like in the story path in Remembrance, there are things of what am I saying again? Oh yeah, sorry, I'm getting a notification that popped up about something really cute that I'm gonna have to check out later. Uh,
I'm gonna have to
but
start
there
having you
are.
like keep your phone away during during
It wasn't in
podcasts.
my phone. It was on Discord. Like it came up on Discord. Sorry,
Okay. Okay.
it was a Discord notification. Um, right. But back to my point is that even during the remembrance section, there are certain checkpoints so that if you accidentally go into something that you've done before, which I like, that happens sometimes when you're just like desperately trying to figure out what the next step is. Um, when you do that, like you can hit a button. It opens up kind of like the path. And what's cool is that it'll actually tell you like some things you need to unlock, to like new keywords you need in order to unlock the next section, and that can give you a guide as well as to like what you should be looking for. Um, Overall, man, like this game slaps on just about every level. Music is phenomenal. They even have like an awesome '80s like idol pop song that a that an AI pop singer who's on on a command ship in space sings to you at one point, and it's
Okay.
like it's just so good, man. It's so good,
Sure.
and it's like it plays into like some like there's a lot of anime like sci-fi anime mecha tropes that they play into. There's a lot of like Western film stuff that they get into. Like I made that Terminator reference, but there's tons of references to like War of the Worlds and like all sorts of stuff. Like one of the girl Natsuno, she's obsessed with UFOs, and her story revolves around her finding a what she believes to be an alien with its brain in a robot body that she finds that tells her something, and she goes, "Oh, so your name's BJ," and she hides it in her sports bag. So when his head pops out of the sports bag, he's like a little Rob looking guy, but he like folds into like a box. And when he pops his head out, he has like a sports towel wrapped like laid over his head, and so it's like it looks like it's a little reference to ET. Like it's super cute. It's super fun. The story, all the characters, even the characters I did not like a lot, I still enjoyed. Stories that I didn't wasn't really too pulled into because they weren't really like I don't think that they were really for me. They're definitely for other people, and other people are really going to love some of these stories that even I didn't really care for too much. A really like fun story is between two of the characters, and it's a like it plays up questions on one of the characters who's from 1945 has to deal with like some like struggling feelings about sexuality and attraction and gender, and like it's done very well and is very good, and I like that part of that story a lot. It was really good.
Cool.
um it
Yeah,
like
on
it
the
does it right.
let's go back to the story side of things a little bit, because it is, you said it's juggling kind of 13 stories, or at least that's what I the impression I get is it's juggling a
Yes.
story for each of the 13 kind of Sentinels, um, as well as kind of an overarching story. So how is that played out? Is it when you're going into a remembrance, you're choosing which Sentinel story you're going to play, or
Yes.
is it kind of doled out to you in a there is a
Mm.
linear fashion to the story?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
You choose each of the Sentinels in a very Did you ever play Romance Saga?
No.
Okay. Um, it's very much in a but you played the original Wild Arms though.
I've played very little of Wild Arms, not enough to know its story. It was like I played it on a
Right.
flight going to a PAX or something like that.
Right, but you know that to start that off, you choose whose story you're going to start with, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So they all get to a central point.
Okay.
That is this, but way larger.
Okay.
Um, in that it's like because those games are all about you get a little prologue, and then it's like in Octopath Traveler, there's a little prologue, and then it's like when they're finally surrounded by everybody.
Yeah. Okay. And then it's like, okay, if you want to pursue this person's story, here's where you go, kind of, or here's
Yeah,
how to do it. Okay. Okay.
not like that because the central story is in battle mode.
Okay.
So they get to play this like 30 plus hour story
So the battle
of
mode is linear.
linear. Yes,
Okay.
battle mode is linear. Each wave is set up. It's like a level selection of 10 levels per phase. Um, well, for the first two phases, and then the third phase is just the final battle. Um, but you have a total of 20 levels to go through. And the replayability on them is super high because you can swap out which units you want. You can have which units' abilities you want. If you want to, you can turn off certain pilot abilities. If you're like, I want more of a challenge in this, because those pilot abilities can like when they stack up towards the end game, like they kind of need to, because the end game's like pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
But like man, I loved it. But anyway, so that's linear, but you do get locked at a certain point because if you haven't progressed enough in Remembrance, it's not going to show you spoilers from Remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find which character's event you have to pass through.
Okay.
There's like one character, not to know, she has what's called the Exterminator event, and that Exterminator event is a locking point for like four different characters you have to get past because going from that point for these characters requires you to have an understanding of what happened to Natsuno here
Gotcha.
as the audience, as the viewer.
Okay.
And the characters are like looking into it, and it's really very good. Like because Natsuno, for a lot of these characters, her story, like she disappears partway through their stories. She's having her own adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and you play through that in her adventure. But then it gets to a point where the rest of her adventure is locked out until you play through other characters getting to that point. And so it all plays into it super well. It's super cohesive. Um, some characters have, you think, because they were you start off with just like the first five,
Mm-hmm.
and you think one of those first five, like you think, oh, okay, these guys are probably gonna have the most story. One of those first five, like, has his stuff locked out till almost the end of the game for like the last half of his stuff, more than half actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last 60 to 70% of his story is locked until almost the end of the game. Um, because it has to do with very important end game stuff. Uh, and it's done well. Like that doesn't bother me whatsoever. I like because you also get to see these characters from the perspective of each of the character that you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
So like oh gosh, there's a ton of examples, but like one of my favorite characters is Amaguchi, and Amaguchi is kind of seen as like this like playboy and like is interested in like Western music and video, like rich boy playboy kind of guy, drives a motorcycle, but he like falls in love with this like this Yankee girl who like is a total badass, and like trying to woo her and win her heart while also like all this other stuff is happening, and like it's awesome. uh but his story is unique because different people look at him in different ways. In the girl that he likes, she looks at him and thinks of him as a playboy, but when you play one of his friends, he's this kind-hearted, generous, considerate person who is like emotionally and physically there for his friends when they need him, and just like has their back no matter what. And it's like, so you get like these different sides of somebody's character and their story, uh where like one of the characters,
Reminds me a little bit of Fire Emblem Three Houses, where
a
like
little bit of that, yeah,
you
for
get
sure.
you don't get a full portrait of a person unless you like experience their scenes with a whole bunch of other characters play out.
That's accurate, yeah. I would definitely say that would be the case. You could kind of compare that to Claude. Claude and the other branches of Three Houses would look at Claude and think, you know, trickster, uh, yada yada. But like when you play through as with the Golden Deer, Claude is this very endearing, wonderful character who looks out for his people and cares about everybody, and also it wants to end racism. So I'm not saying like the other two houses are bad choices. I'm just saying one house wants to end racism and the other wants to enact an autocratic dictatorship. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. And the other one wants to back a religious oligarchy backed sovereign nation monarchy. I'm just saying.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Three Houses, yeah.
three houses.
Cool.
Clearly, they were like, we're gonna have two houses, and they're like, but what if we made a cooler third house? Just saying.
Any final thoughts on 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim?
Yeah, it's the best game that you aren't playing. Like it's the best game of 2020 that
That
nobody
nobody
played.
played. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
and
I
that
think Polygon put no, Polygon wrote an article about how 13 Sentinels is the best PlayStation exclusive of 2020 that nobody's played.
yeah.
And like when I said this game came in and like bucked up my list, I was like, this game looks cool. I want to check it out. I've seen a couple people talk about it. I really want to get into it. When Jason Schreier said, for anybody who told me to keep playing after the first couple hours of 13 Sentinels, thank you. I'm like, this must be good. Like, and like a lot of other people are like, this game's really good. So I was like, I gotta check it out. And sure enough, this game's really good.
Yeah.
And I don't want to overhype it to the point where people play it and they're like, well, it wasn't as amazing or incredible or spectacular as you said it was, Cameron. So I'm downplaying it. I am downplaying it when I say it's a great game
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't want your expectations to be too high for it.
Yeah.
Because when it blew me out of the water, I had
It-
much lower expectations.
Yeah,
for it.
it was it serves as a great surprise, but if you go in expecting like the world, it might let you down a little bit or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the thing is I will definitely say the benefit of this game is that it's so underhyped.
Mm-hmm.
which makes me very trepidatious of trying to hype it up because you got to work. Ever since I ranted and raved about Rocky being one of the best movies of all time, and then my cousin watched it and told me it was all right,
Yeah.
and I was like, how is it just all right? It's the Goonies effect or like the Labyrinth effect.
Yeah.
You blow it up for people, and it's like it's a good movie to them, but like it doesn't mean that much to them.
Yeah, it's somebody going in and watching Star Wars now after Star Wars has been Star Wars for the last 40 years and just being like, I mean, sure, it's a fun space opera, but like if it isn't like, ingrained in your childhood or something like that, you're going to come to it with a
Yeah.
different perspective. Yeah, I definitely hear about it in kind of a ton of the like underrated games lists of 2020 in that conversation. But yeah, it's
I'm just glad.
it
I'm really glad I took the time to play it. Is my thing.
yeah, for me, I think the big like bit of resistance that I have towards it tends to all be like the the setting idea of like mecha kaiju kind of thing just isn't has never really been
That's
my thing. So I don't.
and it's very much my thing. I know.
Yeah,
Like
yes.
when I heard you say that, I'm not gonna lie, Trevor.
Little,
I might
little
be I
half
might
chub.
I might be full blown erection,
There you go. Yeah, yeah,
like tent in my pants, a full on canopy going on up in here.
yeah.
It has the idea like just that phrase has titillated me.
I look forward to
Uh,
if my mom ever meets you, as my mom is an avid listener of the show, uh, and
I
just
keep on
like
forgetting that your parents actually like your mom actually listens to the show.
yeah.
My parents one time when I was running KGN, my parents were like my dad they picked me up from the airport after coming back from Extra Life 2017
Mm-hmm.
and um out from Baltimore. And my dad's like, "Why were you in Baltimore again?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with your life that you're going to Maryland?" Um, and I was like, "Oh, I'm just doing this thing." And my dad finally says, Lisa, that's my mom's name. He goes, "Lisa, with how serious this is getting, we should probably start listening to his show." And I'm like,
No.
"No, no,
Yeah.
mom, dad, don't listen to my show."
Yeah.
Like if you want to know what cleaned up my language on a podcast, it was that moment when I'm like, oh no.
Nice.
So I keep on forgetting that your mom listens to this show.
Yeah.
I must like I'm curious about like what kind of a caricature she must think I am.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure.
It's accurate.
I'm,
It's entirely accurate.
yeah. I'm
But
sure she has an interesting kind of image of you and everybody else. In the show. But yes, 13 Sentinels. I'm glad you really enjoyed it. I'm glad you got a chance to sit down with it and put some time into it. And I'm glad it
I put a
ended
lot
up,
of time into it.
wowing you and kind of, shooting up your game of the year list here at the very last minute. On my
And
side
I'm
of
just glad that
things,
we have rep. I was
yeah.
last note I'll say is I'm just glad that we're gonna have some representation of it,
Mhm.
even if I'm the only one that played it.
Yeah.
I think that this is a game that even if it isn't going to be in everybody's top 10 list, it deserves to be somewhere
Hmm.
because it definitely got shafted coming out the same week as new exclusives or not new exclusives, new consoles.
It came out. Because I was looking at that. It came out in September of this year.
But that was what was that during the announcements or whatever? I remember somebody saying something about
I
like
mean, yeah, it might have been overshadowed by like everybody trying to
yeah.
pre-order the new consoles or something like that.
I think that was the
That
thing.
might
It's
have
like
been it.
nobody bought it because everybody was using their money to buy consoles.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah, because
that was something that somebody said.
yeah, you started to head down that path, and I was like, what else was coming out at this time? And like like the biggest games around that period were like, yeah, Super Mario 3D All Stars came out like a week earlier. But yeah, like Mafia Definitive Edition is in here. Like it came out late September, so Hades was probably the biggest thing a week before that. Like really, probably all the breath, everybody's eyes were still on Hades at that point, maybe.
I mean, everybody's eyes are still
and
on
yeah,
Hades.
and continued to be through October and whatnot. But I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you found it and gave it a shot. Because it definitely sounds like a Cameron ass game. So yeah,
It is the most Cameron-esque game ever since I beat it. I've been like, man, I like they don't really leave anything open for a sequel on it, and Vanillaware typically never does sequels.
hmm
So I doubt that there'll be one. But man, like this was the kind of game that like was definitely like really up my alley.
yeah,
Like definitely, it definitely scratched some itches that I didn't know like we're still itching, which is there just hasn't been. There's not a lot of good mecha games out there,
Mm-hmm.
and like I would kill for a new Armored Core. Like I would kill
That's
for like
That's when I always see like flare
yeah.
up. I always see like Armored Core fans are like diehard fans and just are always wanting Armored Core to come back. Like my biggest exposure to mech, I think, came in the form of like the Mech Warrior games, but even those
Those are
like
fun.
I played them at a friend's house on his PC or something like that when I was growing. Like I never had Mech Warrior myself. Um,
I had Mech Warrior on my aunt's computer. It came with the actual computer, and I played a lot of Mech Warrior.
hmm
Mech Warrior was a lot more of like walking around though,
hmm
and like learning to walk because Mech Warrior mechs are like they're bipeds
Yeah.
and they have no arms and stuff. They're just like biped guns.
I mean, yeah, like they strike me as more like American militaristic versus like something like Zone of the Enders
Hmm.
or something like that, where like
For sure.
what I think of when I think of like like Japanese mech warriors and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I think BattleTech had a like a nice combo of those, and then Armored Core for me has always kind of been like the standard because like it really like it is a absolute travesty that we are not getting Armored Core games in an era where online gameplay and like PvP is a thing.
hmm
Because the entire point of Armored Core is that you're a bounty hunter going through these bounties to like level up and get to that next level. And I would love to see a From Software story based Armored Core game going forward.
hmm
Like Front Mission is like the closest thing we've ever gotten. And Front Mission is awesome, but it's also a tactics game. So
Well, um, we'll switch over to me for a little bit here, because you had this game that kind of like shot up here at the last minute on your Game of the Year list. I had one as well, and that game was Haven.
mhm.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more when I dive into kind of when we have our Game of the Year episode next week. But the for me, Haven is something I had my eye on. I think I got introduced to it at PAX West last year, with Greg and them doing the kind of funny game showcase, but in a PAX panel form. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
Haven was one of the games featured at that event, and I remember looking at that and thinking like, oh, that looks really cool. And then I've just kind of kept my eye on it since then, and it came out earlier this year. And it was a Game Pass game on Xbox. So I was like, okay, actually, I guess it came out late the year. I think it came out like in December. So it really only been out a few weeks. But it was one of those like I'm gonna try and get to that after I get through like Cyberpunk or something.
Oh yes, I wanted to play Haven.
Yeah, and so Haven is basically you play as two characters, U and K, YU and KAY, and they are it's like it kept giving me Saga vibes, as in the graphic novel Saga, in that these are characters from like different classes. It's a Romeo and Juliet kind of story, and they are basically on the run. They've fled kind of their local planet or whatever to try and make a life for themselves apart from their society. Basically, like the game is or the society they live in is centered around a matchmaker that pits or that puts people together, and they have to basically do what the matchmaker says and be with those people, and these two wanted to fall in love or did fall in love and kind of bucked the system as a result. So they're on the
Hell yeah.
run, and so they go to this what they thought was maybe an abandoned planet, but as they kind of like explore it, they start to discover that maybe their civilization had been there and set up kind of camp a little bit before, but something went wrong maybe, and so they're trying to figure
Hmm.
out like what is going on. So the gameplay of this one is very much like it is a very chill game. I was just having kind of very super cool chill vibes. You as these characters, you're kind of like skating, floating around different islands of the world, clearing up rust. So there's like kind of this reddish kind of like almost disease that's taking over parts of the planet, but the flow that you control and the energy, like the life energy around you, kind of disperses the rust. So if you kind of skate across it,
That's awesome.
it disperses and it clears up. And if you disperse over like a handful of like big rust like piles, you'll clean up kind of a whole area. And so you kind of the gameplay is just kind of going from like island to island, clearing out the rust. The rust gets used to like upgrade and fix items on your ship and stuff. You're also collecting crops and plants and stuff that you can use to cook, because one of your characters is very into cooking, the other one is very into eating, so they make a great pair. As well as it kind of allows you to create kind of health packs and healing items, because there's also an element of combat, where the rust is corrupting some of the like the local fauna, of the world, and so like creatures will come and attack you, and you basically have to calm them down and kind of like clear their minds a little bit, pacify them is how the game kind of refers to it. And combat's pretty interesting because you're controlling both characters at the same time. You're using the sticks, and basically like if you whatever you do on the left stick is going to control one character, and whatever you do on the right stick is going to control the other character. You basically have like four options, for each of them. One is like defend, one is like a bash attack, one is a shoot attack, and then the other one is your pacify attack, which if you try and do it before the enemy is weak enough, it's not going to do anything. But you can like, if you have both characters do the same thing at the same time, you get like a double attack going on. And certain enemies
Nice.
are going to be, strong against, like, you basically have to come up with different strategies for each of your enemies, including sometimes where you basically have to offset your attacks, because if you like attack an enemy and then you try and like wait a full, like if you like, because each attack is basically like a charge up attack, and
Hmm.
then you finally do it. So if you basically have to like maybe charge up a shoot attack with one of your characters and then have your pacify attack ready to go, because the enemy won't be downed long enough. They'll like restore their health quickly if you don't have pacify ready to go. So
Hmm.
it's a cool little gameplay mechanic that at a couple times in the game I felt like a little overwhelmed by just trying to control both things at once, when I am so like maybe more used to this kind of combat and style in a turn-based section,
Yeah.
or turn-based idea, having to do it all in real time and kind of make sure you're on the fly with everything. Um, but yeah, it's really cool. Um, and the thing that really stands out for me in this game is you and Kay's relationship. As you kind of go around the world, you kind of get to learn more about their relationship with one another, learn more about kind of their history, and kind of why they fled. But like, there's just so much joy in going back to your camp at the end of it, like in the evening when your characters are getting hungry and kind of need, because if you go too long without food, like your chargers your attacks will take longer to charge up, or
Hmm.
like the timing on certain things will, like, you'll have a narrower window, a more narrow window to kind of like hit your special moves and stuff like that. So you have to kind of keep the characters fed with the items around the world. And like the little scenes and vignettes you get after they've had a meal, or after they've found something in the world that then they bring back to the camp, um, are just, it has the best relationship I think I've seen in video games. Like, I constantly had a grin ear to ear watching these two characters, and the love they have for one another, was just like joy endlessly. Like the way they support one another is great. The gameplay, you're controlling both of them pretty much the entire time. So if like you're leading one as you're kind of like skating around the world, but at with a push of a button you can like swap between the two, because the other one is always there, and it's just which one is leading, which one is kind of trailing right behind. They're doing
Hmm.
this all together. You like, and that like they're just, as you're skating around, they'll just hold hands, and it's just like
Oh, that's fun.
pure like lovely energy between these. When if you're just kind of out there not doing something, and the characters might hug and kind of like transfer health from one to another to kind of even them out, because if you're in battle and an enemy attacks you, one of your characters might take more health, more like might take a bigger hit, And so like if one of your characters is like 90 health and the other one has like 70, they'll hug and shift them to be 80-80. So it's they're more
That's
balanced
awesome.
in battle or something for the next fight. Um, and yeah, it's just like little things like that were just endlessly charming. I loved this, and it is another like it like 13 Sentinels for you. Like came in here at the end of the year, like it was one of the games I was playing really after Cyberpunk, and I was just like, I played it. I want to say over the course of a couple days around Christmas, and it was just like I just loved the game. It was so wonderful, charming, endearing. Like I said, it is currently as of recording, it's an Xbox Game Pass game, but it is available on other platforms. So I think it's on everything. But I played it on Game Pass because I was like I like absolutely I'll
Got it. Yeah.
hop in.
I'll play this game for free.
Yeah, I'm paying for Game Pass for everything else, so let me boot this up. And yeah, just had a great time with it. And it will definitely be it definitely it was the game that spoilers for my list bumped Cyberpunk from like the number 10 spot of my game of the year list. Um, so yeah, it shot up there and I had a great time with it. Yeah. Here at the end of the year, there's always like I feel like there's always one game that kind of comes in last minute for me as well, and
Yeah.
really kind of shakes things up a little bit. It didn't climb to the tip top of my game of the year list like Life is Strange 2 did last year, which like it came in. I played it like basically Chris or New Year's Eve, I think is when I finished that last year, and it like my appreciation for that story shot it up to like number two in last year's Game of the Year stuff.
Mhm.
This didn't quite reach those peaks, but it's definitely something I love. Definitely something. If you have Game Pass, I highly encourage people to check it out. It's maybe a 12-hour experience. More if you want to like go in and do like everything in the game. But yeah, I had a great time with it, and again, it is anchored by a great central relationship between kind of your two main characters. The love they have for one another, the playful banter they have with one another, both out in the world as you're kind of skating around, but really the little vignettes and the little scenes they have are just so full of joy and joyousness. So definitely recommend that one. Um, I also have Ikenfell, which is another one that, admittedly, I played it on PS4, but it is another one, or I played it on the PS5, but the PS4 version. It is another one that is currently on Xbox Game Pass, though. So if you don't want to throw down the $20 for it or whatever it was, but you have Game Pass, it's there for you. I described this yesterday when we were talking when we had a little kind of like mini team meeting to discuss Game of the Year stuff. This one is another one like I remember seeing it pop up over the last year or so and being like, oh, I'm gonna have to try and like check that one out. And so here at the end of the year, I was looking for kind of a new game to hop into, and I remembered that one. Hopped into it. I think I'd seen a couple other people kind of like singing its praises online. And the best way to describe it and how I kind of like shared it with you guys is it is like it is like Harry Potter, but if it was written by or if it was written about a cast of characters that J.K. Rowling would probably hate, given her kind of her personal politics these days, because it is you are going to a Hogwarts stand-in, a school of magic and witchcraft and wizardry kind of thing. The you're playing as Marit, who is like your sister has disappeared. Your sister is basically a Harry Potter type kid, a kid that gets into a little bit of trouble, has a couple of really good friends that kind of helps them through, and they've had many adventures in their years at Ikenfell, the magical school. But Saf has now gone missing, and you're trying to show up and find. And Marit is what is known as an ordinary in the world, in that like she does not have magic, and it's been maybe an issue between kind of Marit and Saf. But she shows up at Ikenfeld to look for her sister, and suddenly and mysteriously has powers. She's suddenly a pyromancer, and so you're trying to figure out. In addition to figuring out like what happened to Saf, you're also trying to figure out like why do you suddenly have powers? Why does your character suddenly have powers? you're going through as um, there's a ton of LGBTQ representation. That's what I was alluding to when talking about
Hmm.
the J.K. Rowling kind of anti J.K. Rowling. It is very much like a response to J.K. Rowling's personal stances, it seems. Um, but as
She's a turf.
yeah,
She's a
um,
turf, and she sucks.
as so yeah, as you're going, you're kind of like uncovering the mysteries around the school, as well as kind of like picking up new crew, like new party members and all that stuff. The gameplay is turn-based tactics kind of RPG. So it like the the most recent analog I had in my mind as I was playing it was admittedly South Park: The Fractured But Whole, where like basically every fight is, your characters are moving around a grid battlefield, and then they are choosing their attacks and stuff like that. Um, and so you kind of have to, you're up. You have a party of up to six, or you have six characters that you can have a party of up to three from. And sometimes you'll basically swap in characters as as appropriate for, like, you've got your kind of tank characters, you've got your healers and support characters, and your kind of stat boosters and all that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, it was a fun game. Um, Great story. I love the story behind it. Great cast of characters, and kind of the seeing the relationships between the characters grow. You kind of get little flashes back to the history through like little memory shards that you can kind of discover around the world. One of the things I really personally enjoyed about this was, as I was trying to kind of like finish it for Game of the Year kind of consideration and stuff like that. I was at a point where I was like, okay, I enjoy the combat, but it's a little slow. I would love to, like, it's very much Super Mario RPG kind of thing as another aspect of it, where it's like if you nail the timing, you'll get a boost in strength, or if you're nailing the timing on defense, you'll take a little bit less damage, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and I just didn't have like the patience to always try to be doing that. And so there's a great little thing
that's fair.
in the options menu where you can turn on, like, you can just kind of make it all manual, where you're having to actually like do the timing on everything. You can turn it to semi-auto mode, where you'll never get an oops, where it's like you take the most possible damage. Everything will be nice, where like you didn't nail the timing perfectly, but you nailed it like enough to not be screwed. Um, or you can turn it to automatic, where everything will be great on the timing front of things. And I got to the point pretty early on where I was like, I'm just going to do that because I don't want to have to try and deal with the timing of everything. Um, and then really later in the game, I took advantage of the victory mode that they have, where they will, like, it's another option that you can turn on. And if you turn this option on, you can go into any fight, and there will be an option for basically an instant victory. So you don't have to kind of go through the combat itself. It'll just be like, if you really just want to enjoy the story of this game, you can turn that on and kind of progress through the story. And yeah, I really like. I enjoyed, especially as I got to maybe two-thirds of the way through the game. I was like, okay, I just kind of want to, like, I know where we're going. I just kind of want to get to the end of this. So like being able to kind of just race through a lot of the combat was really cool. And yeah, it's a great little story. There's it. I mean, if you're looking for like a Harry Potter esque game, this is very much that. It is very 8-bit art style. There's also some like a weird like mix of like, they've got a handful of songs that just kind of will suddenly pop up in the middle of fights with certain characters, that are like fully, full lyrics and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, okay, like bangers, good soundtrack, good music. Um, and so yeah, it's another one, especially if you have Game Pass, I recommend it. If you want to kind of, and if if turn-based tactics games aren't really your jam, you can turn on one of those aforementioned modes and just kind of skip through it and enjoy the story, enjoy kind of these
There you
characters,
go.
and all that stuff. So yeah, Ikenfell, another solid shout out. The game that I probably of these like end of the year things that I put most time into was Immortals Fenyx Rising, which I didn't. I didn't know if after putting 120 hours into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if I was going to be interested in doing another that and like 80 hours into Cyberpunk or whatever it was at the end of the year. If I was going to be up for another open world kind of action RPG game, but Immortals Fenyx Rising just has like a ton of charm to it. It is a fun Greek mythology kind of thing. You're constantly like Prometheus and Zeus are the narrators of the story, are telling Phoenix's story, and so they're constantly kind of like commenting on what you're doing or throwing in little quips or telling sometimes skewed versions of mythology and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. I had a good time with this one. It it takes my biggest issues with Breath of the Wild and like improves upon every single one of them. The fact that there aren't like breakable weapons is great. The like I prefer the storytelling of Phoenix Rising way better than I did Breath of the Wild. But it's still that same kind of like, oh, there are like instead of four champions that you're kind of having to track down and save, you're saving four of the gods. You're saving Ares and Athena and Hephaestus and Aphrodite. You're trying to like restore them to the world in this very open world Breath of the Wild esque kind of format. And yeah,
Quick question.
yeah.
Quick question. Is Hades the bad guy?
No, Hades is not the bad guy. Hades,
Okay, good.
like Hades and Poseidon, and a few of the other like Apollo isn't anywhere to be found. Like it's very much like those four gods and Zeus is kind of like being
Okay.
told the story on high, but like pretty much everybody else, like everyone else might get like the occasional offhanded mention, but yeah, Hades isn't around, Poseidon isn't around. The whole game takes place on quote the Golden Isle, which is a creation by Daedalus that's basically like a best of Greek mythology kind of like island. So it's like if you go to the Aphrodite area, there's allusions to a lot of Aphrodite centric myths. There's obviously the Trojan War kind of references over there with the golden apple. There is there's a lot of the stuff with her and like Narcissus. And so yeah, each of the areas kind of has like their little biomes as well as like a lot of the myth challenges that you can kind of unlock will tell a little bit more stories in there. Each of the areas also has like a corrupted hero that you have to fight and basically like purify, and those are Achilles, Odysseus, Atalanta, and Heracles. And so you basically like if like they're the equivalent of like the like when the blood moon rises or whatever in Breath of the Wild, and everything turns like super red and dark, and enemies just start attacking you. Like each of these areas has one of those heroes that will like it'll be a wraith version of that hero will just kind of come and track you down and hunt you down until you go to the lair of that hero and kind of like solve a quick puzzle and then fight them and defeat them. Other than that, it is like it is the shrines of Breath of the Wild where
Yeah.
there's a ton of puzzles that you can solve, or some of them are just like combat heavy things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like so I again I really enjoyed it as somebody who notoriously did not think Breath of the Wild was the greatest game of all time or whatever. I thought it was a fine game, but I had so many issues with it. This again, I want to say the nanobiologist Mick Abramson, friend of the show and kind of the community and all that stuff. He put out a tweet that effectively said something to the effect of like, Breath of the Wild walked so Immortals Fenyx Rising could run, and that more or less sums up kind of my thoughts on it. I think the team at Ubisoft, who has a much longer lineage of making these kinds of games,
Yeah.
I think does a great job of it. And it goes beyond the fact that like, oh, if in Breath of the Wild, you go to a high vantage point and you can see everything that you want to try and do around the map. This is like Immortals of Fenyx Rising is the same kind of way, but you can also then like tag all of those things around the world. You can, you can find
Mm.
where the chests are. You can find where some of the challenges are, some of the fresco things, all that stuff. Um, so yeah, it's a cool little game with a lot of fun Greek mythology in there. Um, it would have been very interesting if this game had come out not immediately after Watch Dogs and and Assassin's Creed Valhalla from Ubisoft. Like I don't.
Yeah.
It is very much a Titanfall 2 Battlefield 1 kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know why you cannibalized your own audience by putting three of these massive open world games out within 2 months of each other. Um,
Their Q4 strategy this year makes no sense.
yeah, it was just like
And I'm
eh,
like,
eh, eh,
you're putting out 3 games within the same genre,
that are
all
all
from you.
immediately on sale. Like the fact that you
Yep.
could like already, I think, get all three of those games for like $30 over the holidays was like absurd. Um, a great deal for any of them, but like, yeah, it's
That shouts how bad of a strategy that was.
yeah, it was like just spread it out a little bit. Like I like, and it has to have
Nobody
been
needed
like
Immortals Phoenix. Nobody needed Immortals this year. You could have pushed it out till next year.
yeah, and it would have had
Um,
more room to breathe in a less crowded market, as well as a little bit of space from Hades, which certainly again was kind of like eating up the Greek
Eating
mythology
lunch.
conversation of things. But Phoenix is a great character. I played with a female Phoenix, and she just had a ton of fun, charm and wit and humor behind her. Like she is a great character compared to the like there are a lot of people that liked Eivor, but I was kind of like Eivor was just kind of like a nothing ish character. Like this was a Ubisoft protagonist that had like had a character to her. And I really enjoyed my time with that game. So yeah, that was my time with Immortals Fenyx Rising. Yeah, I think as we get into early 2021 and you kind of get that early year lull where people are looking for something to play, I think this is a game that people will hop into and give a shot. Whereas maybe they were overwhelmed by Cyberpunk and Valhalla and the
Mhm.
time that those games also ask of you. And then lastly, I after finishing all of those other things, I was like, okay, it's a new year. What do I want to do now? What do I like? What am I going to play? Let's go hop back into Demon Souls a little bit. And so
That's what's up.
I shared with you and in our Slack a couple days ago. I basically spent a couple hours just farming crescent moon grass because that was one of the frustrating things that like broke me was I just didn't have any way of healing my character anymore by the end of my stream. So I filled up my storage with like the max 99 half moon grasses or whatever it was, and then continued collecting them. Um, and yeah, hop back into that. This it'll go live the Thursday after this episode airs, but I sat down and recorded my time. Like I didn't record like the farming for crescent grass and all that stuff, but once I had that all stockpiled, I sat down, recorded another Let's Play. So it'll be part 5 of Trevor playing Demon Souls that'll go on the live on the YouTube channel on this Thursday of me returning to the prison and fighting the Fool's Idol. It took me 2 attempts, but I managed to defeat them on the second time out again with a nice healthy stockpile of heals under my belt. And so yeah, it's it's definitely one I'm going to continue to chip away at here. Um, but like I enjoyed hopping back into it and not banging my head against a wall. Like I definitely I looked at a guide a little bit before I started playing just because I was like I know I'm gonna get lost trying to get there. And there's a point I mentioned in the Let's Play where I'm like, there might just be a weird edit here where I'm gonna like hop off, go look at how to find it. I ended up not needing to. I ended up being able to find my way around there. But yeah, like my plan is effectively I'm gonna kind of look at a strategy before I go in and play the game because that's just how I want to enjoy these games.
Go for it, man.
And then I'm gonna and I might do kind of like off stream quote unquote a stockpiling of grass again, more farming each time in between battles. Because as it is, like I almost burned through what I took with me, so I need to kind of like over prepare is kind of what I need to anticipate doing. But yeah, I had a good time kind of going back in it, and so yeah, we're gonna see if I can kind of keep chipping away at my time with Demon Souls as I progress through. So because that's four bosses I've beaten in that game so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it. I'm surprised that it had a draw on me enough to kind of like keep trying to come back to it. I
Mhm.
even like there was a split second there where I was like, okay, well, since I want to keep doing this, but and doing it for Let's Plays, but I'm not ready to hop in and like record the next Let's Play for Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Um, I even re-downloaded Bloodborne and then looked at that on my dashboard for like a good, I don't know, 10 seconds. Was like, no, Trevor, this is a bad idea,
That is a bad idea, Trevor. Don't do it.
and re-deleted it. So
There you go.
like it's one I'll maybe circle back to Bloodborne after finishing Demon Souls, but I'm not gonna try and do two Soulsborne games at the same time because I think
Nope, you shouldn't do
I
that.
would just hate myself. So yeah,
Yeah, sounds about right.
so back playing some Demon Souls as I look for something new to play here in 2021.
I don't even know what games are coming out in 2021, man.
That's I mean yeah it like January especially like is going to be a slow month I think for me especially like the biggest game I think coming out is like the Medium for Xbox, and that's the one where um you are playing through like two different worlds simultaneously that you can switch between like the
Oh
light world
yeah,
and the
yeah,
dark
yeah.
world kind of thing. And
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, that game's coming out. Okay.
it's like spooky times. It was supposed to be originally like a Series X launch game, but they had to push it to January. And yeah, so like I look at that, I'm like, no, that's not really going to be for me. I mentioned kind of before we started recording, I don't have enough. I have not put enough time into it to have any kind of concrete thoughts, but with all the love that people are putting into Yakuza Like a Dragon, I thought about like picking that one up, but then I'm like, but I don't know anything about the Yakuza games, so I've started Yakuza Kiwami to get introduced to that world and those characters, and that might be like my January like game like or my January time might just be like let me explore Yakuza and figure out what this series is like. Much in the way that January of 2020, I basically spent playing The Witcher 3, like finally going back and playing through that game. So, um, like another option I have kind of on the plate would be um, playing Cyberpunk on PlayStation. But I just pretty much want to wait until that's on um, like fixed and ready to go
Yeah.
before really hopping back into that one because I do want to see like other ways to play out that game, the other kind of story paths and that stuff. And I'm just not like I'm just gonna wait until it's a more stable experience, I think. But yeah, so Yakuza Kiwami. As I mentioned before we started recording, I guess I claimed as a PlayStation Plus game at one point, so I had it in my library. I was like, yeah, all right, I'll give that a shot. But it's like I'll dip my toe in the water before really fully diving in because I was like, I could do Kiwami 1 and 2 through Game Pass if I wanted to, and then there's like the remastered collection that I could get for $20, $30 or something like that. Then there's 6, and then finally 7. I don't think I'm gonna like do all of them because I don't. That's not a great.
Well, don't forget about Yakuza 0.
Yeah, Yakuza 0 as the prequel that came out after. This is another thing. I was like, I don't know, especially with the Kiwami nomenclature. I was like, I don't know which of the games are like what the chronological order of things. Like, when did 0 come out? Because yeah, I could play 0 first, but it seems like designed that it
Zero
was.
is the like I think actually like dated like it's the late like it was the latest one before Like a Dragon.
I think in
Because
looking at
7
it,
is the Song of Life, which
yeah,
is the last entry of Kiryu Saga, but
six is
Yakuza 0.
yeah, 6 is the Song of Life. It
Oh,
was
6 is the
yeah.
Song of Life.
I
Then yeah.
believe it came out Yakuza 5, then 0, then Song of Life, and then Like a Dragon. Um, So yeah, I think Zero came out after 5 chronologically, but obviously yeah, as the prequel to the first game.
I think it came out before 7, but I might be wrong.
I'm pretty sure that's what I saw when I was looking at like the chronology of
Yeah,
of the Yakuza
it's quite
series.
possible. We're
Um,
neither of us are experts, so it's fine.
late last night, as I was like jumping between the PlayStation Store um, and the Wikipedia page for Yakuza series. But yeah, so maybe I'll have more thoughts on that in the future here as I look for anything to play. I also have an idea for a stream series that I've talked with Logan a little bit about, and we'll see if I actually pull the trigger on doing that anytime soon. That would be a similar kind of thing of like, let's just like play through a whole bunch of games in a franchise. I've got like even an image mocked up for that when
Hmm.
I'm ready to pull the trigger on that. But that's also going to be a huge time sink. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you, Cam, for sitting down, chatting with me. Um,
Always.
yeah. Let's go around the table with any metaphorical table. I always do this. Metaphorical table with any plugs we have. Cam, you can follow Cam at RevCabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Cam?
Yeah, I just want to give a really great shout out over to our friends over at Uppercut. They put out for the month of December a long list of letters. Like they are, I love Uppercut not just because it's like made up of our friends who are wonderful, terrific people, but also because they just do things differently than
Mm-hmm.
everybody else. They just have such a like their approach to something is just, hey, everybody's doing this. What if we do this instead? Like they're always zagging when everybody's zigging. Um, and I don't think that we could ever replicate what they do because it's wholly unique to them.
Yep.
Um, but they have been doing a like love letters to the games that came out this year. They have a ton of guest writers for it. Um, uh, I was not honored or lucky enough to be able to write one, but uh, the love letter, especially from Jess about Final Fantasy VII on Uppercut, is poignant. It is tear jerking, and it is a testament to her capabilities as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
which is a craft that she's been honing for a very long time, and is just absolutely deft at how she uses the written word. But the story that she tells in that letter and the way that it conveys her love for the Final Fantasy VII remake, I think it's incredibly poignant and it's wonderful to read, especially when Final Fantasy VII remake is so far from our minds about Game of the Year because of its place as an early release this year,
Mm-hmm.
coming out like right after COVID started landing everywhere, before shutdowns and stuff started happening in full. So it feels like a lifetime ago that we all played that game.
Yep.
But reading her letter brought it back into, I think, like a very nice spotlight. Um, and it's a beautiful piece. I just highly suggest somebody goes over there reads all of those letters because they're from people from all over the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are from unrepresented voices, so like voices from communities or parts of the gaming community that are usually underrepresented, which is kind of the MO of Uppercut and what they do.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's awesome. Definitely go check those out.
Cool. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J Starkey, and I will similarly shout out. I was invited last week to guest for our friend Harold Price over at H Bomb and Friends. I was a guest top 10 with them on one of their podcasts. So kind of it's basically like if you want to tease for what my top 10 will be when we sit down for our episode, you can go check that out now. And then I also want to give a shout out to our current plans are to sit down, me, Cam, Frank, and Logan as kind of the games, side of the site. We're currently planning to sit down this Saturday. What is that? The 9th, I think. And we're going to try and do basically a live version on Twitch of our kind of game of the year conversation where we're gonna kind of go around round robin style, do our honorable mentions, our top tens, and just kind of talk about all of our favorite games of the year. If you can't catch it live, it'll go up as kind of the normal episode next week for everybody. It's almost certainly going to be a long, beefy one because we're going to be talking about lots and lots of games and our love for them over the course of 2020. And so yeah, we're trying, to see how we can, if we can, if it'll work to kind of like Twitch stream the podcast live. So yeah, tentatively, I think we're looking at maybe like 1 p.m. Mountain Time, so like 2 Central, like noon Pacific, I guess, is maybe
That's the best way to put it. Yeah.
the best way to put it here, as our time zones are the middle parts of the country that people like to fly over. But yeah, so we're gonna try that this weekend. If you can't catch it live again, it'll be the normal episode next week. But it should be a good one because it's gonna be us talking about all of our favorite games of the year, and then coinciding with that next week, we should be doing basically a week of written content on the site to kind of like each of us will have our top 10 on a given day, and then we'll kind of probably culminate on Friday of next week with kind of the site wide top 10 based off of our personal lists. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that. You can find all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all of the latest content from us. If you liked what you heard, please, once again, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you can, maybe consider supporting us over on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a bonus episode of this show. Our episode from November of the four of us on the game side talking about kind of our forgotten gems of last generation. That's up and available to everybody now. And if you want kind of early access to the December episode, that's me and Logan talking about kind of our 2020 just in review of That Nerdy Site a little bit. We kind of went into the episode with very little like of an idea of what we were going to chat about. And even like as we started the episode, we had an idea of what we were going to talk about, and then just kind of spun off into something different. But it's Logan and I kind of talking about the highs as well as kind of like the not lows necessarily, but the way that COVID kind of impacted what some of our plans for the site might have been over the course of the year. So and then a little bit of like what we hope for, maybe how we hope to grow here in 2021. So you can go check that out. Any patron, $1 and above, go check that out. We definitely appreciate it. But that's going to do it. Thank you, as always, for listening. And then, as always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.